Move and you're dead. The words cut through the air like a blade, low and deadly, spoken by a man whose emerald eyes had locked onto something over her shoulder, something that made every muscle in his body coil like a spring. Isabella froze, the empty coffee cup still clutched in her trembling hand, brown liquid dripping down the front of his crisp white shirt, spreading across expensive fabric like a stain she could never wash away. But he wasn't looking at the mess. He wasn't even looking at her anymore. He was looking at the glint of metal across the street, at the barely perceptible movement in the third-floor window of the abandoned building she'd just been inside. 3 seconds ago, she'd thrown scalding hot coffee directly into the face of Adrian Volkov, and she'd done it on purpose. 2 seconds ago, she'd realized it was the worst mistake of her life. 1 second ago, she'd seen his hand move to the small of his back, to the weapon she suddenly knew was there. And now, 3 sharp cracks split the morning air, bullets slamming into the brick wall exactly where Adrian had been standing before he'd moved, faster than she thought possible. His body suddenly pressed against hers, his hand on the back of her head, forcing her down behind the cover of a parked SUV. The metal was cool against her spine, the morning sun suddenly too bright. Everything happening too fast. "Stay down." His voice was different now, not the smooth, cultured tone he'd used in the cafe 30 minutes ago when he'd sat across from her, studying her like she was a puzzle he intended to solve. This voice was rough, commanding, the voice of a man who expected to be obeyed without question. Isabella couldn't breathe. Her lungs had forgotten how. She could smell gunpowder and expensive cologne, and her own fear, sharp and metallic on her tongue. The coffee cup had fallen from her hand, rolling away across the sidewalk, and she watched it go with a strange detachment, thinking absurdly that she'd have to pay for that. The cafe would charge her for the broken ceramic, and how ridiculous that seemed now with bullets flying and her heart trying to punch its way out of her chest. "I said stay down." Adrian's hand was still on her head, fingers tangled in her dark hair, and she realized she'd been trying to rise, trying to see, her body moving without permission from her brain. He shifted, his other hand bringing up a matte black handgun that looked like it belonged in a movie. Not here. Not on this ordinary street in Chicago, where she bought her coffee every morning, and fed the stray cat that lived behind the dumpster, and pretended her life was normal. Another shot. This one closer. The SUV's window exploded above them, safety glass raining down like diamonds, and Isabella heard herself make a sound she'd never made before. Something between a gasp and a sob. How many? Adrian wasn't talking to her. He had a phone pressed to his ear now, weapons still trained on the building across the street, his body angled to keep her behind him. "3rd floor, northeast corner. I've got a civilian." A pause. His jaw tightened, a muscle jumping beneath the dark stubble that shadowed his face. "No, she stays with me. Civilian." The word bounced around in Isabella's skull like a pinball. She was a civilian, which meant he wasn't, which meant everything she'd heard, everything her brother had told her 3 days before he died, was true. Adrian Volkov wasn't just the owner of the luxury restaurant on 5th Avenue. He wasn't just the mysterious benefactor who'd bought out half the city's waterfront properties. He was exactly what the newspapers whispered about, what the police pretended not to know. He was the head of the Volkov family, the Chicago Bratva, the Russian Mafia, and she'd just thrown hot coffee in his face to create a distraction so she could plant the listening device her brother's friend had given her, the one she'd tucked under the seat in the cafe booth while Adrian's attention was supposedly on his ruined shirt. Except Adrian hadn't been distracted at all. The shooting stopped. The silence that followed was somehow worse than the gunfire, heavy and expectant, like the air before a thunderstorm. Isabella's ears were ringing, a high-pitched whine that made it hard to think, and her hands were shaking so badly she had to clench them into fists against her thighs. "They're gone." Adrian straightened slowly, gun still out, still scanning. Then he turned to look at her, and Isabella forgot how to breathe all over again. His eyes were the color of deep water, that impossible shade between green and gray that changed with the light, and right now they were cold as winter seas, studying her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. His face was all sharp angles and hard lines, the kind of handsome that belonged on movie screens, slightly cruel around the mouth, made more dangerous by the tattoo that snaked up the left side of his neck, Cyrillic letters she couldn't read disappearing beneath his collar. The coffee had left dark stains across his chest, but he didn't seem to notice or care. Stand up. Not a request, a command. Isabella's legs didn't want to work, but she forced them to obey, using the SUV for support as she rose on shaking knees. She was tall, 5'9" in her sneakers, but Adrian still had 4 inches on her, and the way he was looking at her made her feel small in a way that had nothing to do with height. Her voice came out as a croak. She tried again. I'm sorry, I didn't mean the coffee was an accident. I tripped. Don't. The word was soft, almost gentle, which somehow made it more terrifying than if he'd shouted. Don't insult my intelligence by lying to me, Isabella. He knew her name. Of course he knew her name. The way he said it, with that slight roll on the L that hinted at an accent he usually kept hidden, made it sound like a caress and a threat all at once. The device you planted, he continued, still in that same quiet, dangerous voice, was under the booth seat, left side, small enough to fit under your thumbnail. Impressive, actually. If I hadn't been watching you specifically, I might have missed it. The blood drained from Isabella's face so fast she swayed on her feet. He caught her elbow, steadying her, his grip firm but not painful, and that small kindness made her want to cry more than anything else. Why were you watching me? The question came out before she could stop it, and she saw something flicker in his eyes, there, and gone too quickly to identify. Because, Adrian said, someone put a hit out on me 3 days ago, and the morning after that hit was ordered, you started showing up at my cafe every day at exactly 8:15, always alone, always nervous, always sitting in the booth closest to where I conduct my morning meetings. He tilted his head slightly, studying her. So I'm going to ask you once, and I suggest you think very carefully before you answer. Who sent you? Isabella's mind was racing, spinning through options like a roulette wheel, looking for something, anything, that might get her out of this alive. She could lie. Say she didn't know what he was talking about, that the device must have been there already, that this was all a terrible misunderstanding. But looking into those cold green eyes, she knew with absolute certainty that lying would be the last thing she ever did. She could tell him the truth. But the truth meant admitting that her brother, Michael, had gotten mixed up with people like Adrian, had tried to skim money from a drug shipment, had paid for that mistake with his life. The truth meant admitting that she'd been trying to gather evidence against Adrian for the past 3 days, driven by grief and rage, and the desperate need to make someone pay for the fact that her baby brother, 23 years old with his whole life ahead of him, was lying in a cemetery plot she couldn't afford. The truth meant signing her own death warrant. No one sent me, she heard herself say, and watched his eyes narrow. I mean, not the way you think. My brother, Michael Chen. Do you remember him? Something changed in Adrian's expression, a slight softening around the eyes that might have been recognition, or might have been pity. Isabella couldn't tell which would be worse. I remember, he said quietly. He's dead. The words tasted like ashes. And everyone says you killed him. I didn't. You expect me to believe that? I don't particularly care what you believe. Adrian's hand was still on her elbow, and he used it now to steer her away from the bullet-riddled SUV, toward a black sedan that had materialized at the curb, driven by a man in a dark suit who kept his eyes straight ahead, professionally not seeing anything. But I do care about the fact that someone just tried to kill both of us, and the timing of that is very interesting, don't you think? Isabella tried to pull away. I'm not going anywhere with you. That's not really up for debate. Adrian opened the sedan's back door, and the casual ease of the gesture made it clear this wasn't a request. Someone knew you were meeting with me this morning. Someone knew exactly where we'd be and when, which means either they're watching you or they're watching me, or, and this is the option I find most intriguing, someone wanted to kill 2 birds with 1 stone, literally. Why would anyone want to kill me? I'm nobody. You're Michael's sister. Adrian's voice was gentle now, almost kind, which made the fear in Isabella's chest spike higher. "And you've been asking questions, talking to his friends, making noise about justice and evidence and going to the police. In my world, that makes you very much somebody." The implications of what he was saying crashed over her like a wave. If Adrian hadn't killed her brother, then someone else had. Someone who might now see her as a loose end. Someone who'd just proven they were willing to tie off that loose end with bullets and blood. "I need you to get in the car, Isabella." Adrian's hand on her elbow tightened fractionally, because in about 30 seconds the police are going to arrive, and they're going to have questions neither of us want to answer. And because whoever just tried to kill us is probably still watching, and the longer you stand here arguing with me, the longer you're a target. She looked at the open car door, at the dark interior that smelled like leather and danger, and then back at Adrian. His face was unreadable, but there was something in his eyes, some quality she couldn't name, that made her think maybe, just maybe, getting in the car wouldn't be the stupidest thing she'd ever done. That honor still belonged to throwing coffee at a mafia boss. "If I get in that car," she said, proud that her voice barely shook, "what happens to me?" Adrian's smile was sharp enough to cut. "That depends entirely on what you tell me in the next hour." In the distance, sirens wailed. Isabella looked at the cafe where she'd sat an hour ago, trying to work up the courage for what she was about to do. She looked at the bullet holes in the brick wall, at the shattered glass glittering on the sidewalk, at the few brave pedestrians starting to emerge from the buildings where they'd taken cover. She looked at Adrian Volkov, this dangerous, beautiful man who might have killed her brother, or might be the only person who could help her find out who did. And then she got in the car. The sedan moved smoothly into traffic, away from the chaos, and Isabella watched through the tinted windows as police cruisers screamed past them going the opposite direction. Her hands were still shaking. She pressed them flat against her thighs, trying to still the tremors, trying to think. "There's water in the compartment between us." Adrian had settled into the seat beside her, close enough that she could feel the heat of him, far enough that she didn't feel immediately threatened. He'd put the gun away somewhere, and now he was pulling out his phone, typing something with quick, efficient movements. "You should drink something. You're going into shock." "I'm fine." The words were automatic, meaningless. She wasn't fine. She was the opposite of fine. She was in a car with a man who could kill her with his bare hands, driving to an unknown destination, because someone had just tried to murder her, and every survival instinct she possessed was screaming that she'd just made everything worse. But she took the water bottle anyway, and when she drank, it helped. A little. "Where are we going?" "Somewhere safe." Adrian glanced up from his phone, and she realized the coldness had left his eyes, replaced by something sharper, more calculating. "Tell me about the listening device. Where did you get it?" "A friend of Michael's, someone he knew from before." "Before he started working for the Kozlov family?" Isabella's head snapped around. "How did you—" "I know everything that happens in my city." Adrian pocketed his phone, giving her his full attention now, and Isabella felt pinned by that gaze, like a butterfly under glass. "Your brother was a good kid, smart, loyal, but he made the mistake of thinking he could play both sides. And in this business, that's a death sentence. So you did kill him." "No." Adrian's voice was hard now, leaving no room for doubt. "Dmitri Kozlov killed him, slit his throat and dumped him in the river as a message to anyone else thinking about betraying the family. But Michael wasn't betraying Kozlov. He was feeding information to the FBI." The world tilted sideways. Isabella grabbed the door handle, needing something solid to hold on to. "No, Michael wouldn't, he wasn't, he was trying to do the right thing." Something that might have been respect flickered across Adrian's face. "He came to me 6 months ago, said he'd gotten in over his head with Kozlov, that he wanted out but he knew too much. I told him I'd protect him if he helped me take Kozlov down." A pause. "I failed." The simple admission, delivered without excuse or justification, hit Isabella harder than any elaborate explanation could have. She searched Adrian's face for deception, for the smooth lies she'd expected, but found only a grim honesty that she didn't know what to do with. Why should I believe you? Because if I'd wanted you dead, you'd be dead. Adrian's bluntness was almost refreshing after days of people offering her useless sympathy and empty platitudes. Because I have no reason to lie to you. And because that friend of your brother's, the one who gave you the listening device, his name is Sergei Volkov, and he works for me. Isabella's blood turned to ice. What? The whole thing was a setup. Adrian watched her process this, his expression unreadable. Sergei approached you 3 days ago, told you I'd killed Michael, offered you a way to get evidence against me. You, grieving and angry and desperate for someone to blame, took him up on it. And someone who's been waiting for exactly this kind of opportunity, used your grief as bait to lure me into the open. You're saying you let me plant that device? You knew the whole time? I suspected something was off when Sergei reported that Kozlov's people had approached him, trying to use him to get to me. I didn't realize they'd dragged you into it until yesterday. Adrian's jaw tightened. By then, pulling you out would have tipped them off. So I let it play out, took precautions, and hoped I could keep you safe until we figured out what Kozlov was really planning. The sedan pulled into an underground parking garage, concrete and shadows, and the echo of their tires on smooth pavement. Isabella watched the levels descend, B1, B2, B3, each one taking her deeper into Adrian's world, farther from any chance of escape. Those precautions didn't work very well, she said, and was surprised to hear anger cutting through the fear in her voice. Someone just shot at us. Someone shot at where I was supposed to be. Adrian's correction was precise. If you hadn't thrown that coffee when you did, if I hadn't moved to avoid it, those bullets would have gone through my skull. Instead, they hit brick and glass. The sedan stopped. The driver got out, opened Adrian's door, then hers. Isabella stepped onto smooth concrete, looking around at the dim garage, at the other expensive cars parked in neat rows, at the security cameras that watched from every corner. Are you saying I saved your life? The absurdity of it would have made her laugh if she weren't so terrified. I'm saying your timing was either incredibly lucky or incredibly suspicious. Adrian moved toward a private elevator, and Isabella had no choice but to follow or be left alone in the underground dimness. Which is why you're staying with me until I figure out which. The elevator doors opened. Isabella looked at the polished interior, at Adrian waiting for her with that unreadable expression, at the choice that wasn't really a choice at all. And if I refuse? Then Kozlov's people find you within the hour, and you end up like your brother. Adrian's honesty was brutal. I'm offering you protection, Isabella. I'm offering you the truth about what happened to Michael. And if you help me, I'm offering you the chance to make the people responsible pay for what they did. Why? The question burst out of her. Why do you care? Why does any of this matter to you? Something dark and dangerous moved behind Adrian's eyes. Because Dmitry Kozlov has been trying to take over my territory for the past year. Because he killed your brother to send me a message. And because if I don't stop him now, he'll keep killing everyone I fail to protect until there's nothing left of this city but blood and ashes. He stepped into the elevator, held the door, and waited. Isabella thought about her apartment, small and cluttered and safe, where her biggest worry was making rent. She thought about her job at the library, shelving books and helping patrons and pretending her life had meaning. She thought about Michael's funeral, about the closed casket because the damage had been too severe, about the way her parents had looked at her, hollow and broken, like they'd lost both their children that day. She thought about the coffee cup falling, about bullets hitting brick, about the cold certainty that someone wanted her dead. And then she stepped into the elevator. The doors closed with a whisper of hydraulics, and Isabella watched the numbers climb. 1, 2, 3, penthouse. The silence was heavy between them, weighted with things unsaid, with the knowledge that in the span of an hour, her entire life had been ripped apart and reassembled into something she didn't recognize. I want to know everything. Her voice sounded stronger now, steadier. Everything about Michael, about Kozlov, about what really happened. No more lies. No more manipulation. If I'm risking my life for this, I deserve the truth. Adrian studied her for a long moment, and she had the distinct impression she was being evaluated, measured against some internal standard she couldn't see. Then he nodded, once, sharp and decisive. Deal. The elevator opened onto a penthouse that took Isabella's breath away. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the Chicago skyline, Lake Michigan a blue expanse in the distance. The furniture was minimalist, expensive, the kind of deliberate simplicity that cost more than most people's yearly salary. Art on the walls, real art, she suspected, not prints, and everywhere the sense of controlled space, of a life lived with precision. Make yourself comfortable. Adrian shrugged out of his ruined jacket, tossed it over a chair. The gun came out too, placed carefully on a side table within easy reach. I'll get cleaned up, then we'll talk. He disappeared down a hallway, and Isabella was left alone in the vast space, feeling small and out of place. She moved to the windows, looking out at the city spread below, and tried to process everything that had happened. 24 hours ago, her biggest concern had been whether she could afford to keep her brother's apartment as some kind of memorial. Now she was standing in a mafia boss's penthouse, complicit in whatever dangerous game he was playing, because the alternative was death. How had her life become a thriller movie? She heard water running, distant, and realized Adrian was showering. The thought made her face heat, unwelcome images flashing through her mind, water running over tattooed skin, strong hands, the hard planes of a body built for violence and control. She pushed the thoughts away viciously. This was not the time, and he was definitely not the person, for whatever misplaced attraction her traumatized brain was trying to manufacture. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, making her jump. She pulled it out, saw a number she didn't recognize. Her thumb hovered over the answer button, uncertain. It buzzed again. I wouldn't. Adrian's voice made her spin around. He'd changed into black slacks and a dark gray shirt, sleeves rolled to his elbows, revealing the tattoos that covered his forearms, Cyrillic text and religious imagery, and symbols she didn't understand. His hair was still damp, darkened to almost black. That's Kozlov's people checking to see if you survived the hit. If you answer, they'll trace the call. Isabella's hand tightened on the phone. How do you know? Because it's what I do. Adrian crossed to a desk, opened a laptop, fingers moving across the keyboard with practiced ease. Leave it on. Let them think you're too scared to answer. It buys us time. The phone stopped buzzing. Started again. Stopped. Sit down, Isabella. Adrian gestured to the couch, and his voice had lost some of its hard edge. I promised you the truth. You should probably be sitting for it. She sat, perched on the edge of expensive leather, and watched as Adrian poured 2 glasses of amber liquid from a crystal decanter. He handed her one, and she took it automatically, not sure if she planned to drink it or throw it at him. Your brother, Adrian began, settling into the chair across from her, was recruited by Kozlov's organization 8 months ago. Low-level work at first, running packages, keeping watch, the kind of jobs we give to prospects to see if they can handle the life. He took a drink, and Isabella saw the tension in his shoulders, the weight of words he didn't want to say. Michael was good at it, smart enough to keep his head down, charming enough to make friends. Kozlov promoted him fast, started trusting him with bigger jobs. And that's when he came to you? That's when he realized what Kozlov's bigger jobs actually involved. Adrian's expression darkened. Human trafficking. Girls, mostly, brought in from Eastern Europe under false pretenses, forced into prostitution. It's Kozlov's specialty, and it's the one line most of us in the old families won't cross. Isabella's stomach turned. Most of you? I don't pretend to be a good man. Adrian met her eyes directly, unflinching. I run illegal gambling, money laundering, protection rackets. I've killed people who threatened me or mine. But there are rules, Isabella. Lines that separate criminals from monsters. Kozlov crossed those lines years ago. So Michael came to you, And you convinced him to work with the FBI? I convinced him to work with me. The FBI was his idea. Adrian set down his glass with careful control. He wanted insurance, thought if he could give the feds enough evidence to take down Kozlov's trafficking ring, they'd protect him, maybe give him immunity. I agreed to help him gather that evidence. But something went wrong. Kozlov found out. I don't know how. We were careful. Michael was smart. But somehow, word got back that there was a rat in the organization. Adrian's jaw clenched. Kozlov made an example of him. Public, brutal, designed to terrify anyone else thinking about betrayal. Isabella's hands shook, liquid sloshing in her glass. She set it down before she spilled it, before she had to admit how badly this was affecting her. And you did nothing? I did everything I could. For the first time, real emotion bled into Adrian's voice. Anger, frustration, maybe even grief. But by the time my people found out what was happening, Michael was already dead. Kozlov's crew dumped his body where we'd find it. Another message. This is what happens when you try to play hero. The room was too quiet. Isabella could hear her own breathing. Too fast, too shallow. She could hear the city outside, muffled by expensive glass. She could hear the crack in her heart widening, threatening to split her completely in half. Why didn't you tell the police? If you had evidence, what evidence? Adrian's laugh was bitter. I had a dead informant and enemies who'd made sure there was nothing tying them to the murder. The police in this city are either on Kozlov's payroll or too scared to touch him. Going to them would have accomplished nothing except painting a target on my back. So you just let him get away with it. I've been planning how to take Kozlov down for 3 months. Adrian leaned forward, intensity radiating from him like heat. Carefully, methodically, waiting for the right moment to strike hard enough that he doesn't get back up. And then you walked into my cafe, and suddenly Kozlov had a new opportunity. Isabella frowned. I don't understand. He sent someone to you, probably Sergei, feeding you that story about me killing Michael. Got you angry enough, desperate enough to try planting that bug, and then he made sure I knew about it. Why would he want you to know? Because it gave him an excuse to kill us both and make it look like a betrayal gone wrong. Adrian stood, moved to the windows, and Isabella found herself watching the line of his shoulders, the coiled tension in his body. If you'd succeeded in bugging me, Kozlov would have discovered your deception, killed you as a traitor, and used it as justification to move against me, the man who got an innocent girl killed. But I didn't succeed. No, because I was watching for exactly this kind of play. Adrian turned to face her, and in the light from the windows, his eyes were storm-colored, dangerous. What Kozlov didn't count on was you throwing that coffee. Your timing was perfect. Too perfect. You moved half a second before the shooter fired, which means either you have supernatural reflexes, or what? Isabella's voice was barely a whisper. Or some part of you knew something was wrong. Maybe you saw the glint of the scope. Maybe you heard something. Maybe it was pure instinct. But that coffee wasn't just about creating a distraction for the bug. It saved both our lives. Isabella's mind was reeling, trying to process the maze of manipulation and counter-manipulation, the ways she'd been used as a pawn in a game she hadn't known she was playing. Anger started to burn through the fear, hot and clarifying. You keep talking about Kozlov like he's this mastermind, but he screwed up. She stood facing Adrian across the expensive carpet. I'm still alive. You're still alive. Whatever he was planning, it didn't work. Which makes you incredibly valuable. Adrian crossed to her, and Isabella's breath caught at his sudden proximity, at the way he seemed to fill the space between them with barely contained energy. You're the proof that Kozlov ordered a hit on a civilian, that he's willing to kill innocents to get to me. In our world, that matters. It gives me leverage with the other families, reason to move against him openly. You want to use me as bait. The realization was sour on her tongue. I want to keep you alive. Adrian's voice dropped, intimate and fierce. I want to give you the justice your brother deserves. And yes, I want to use this opportunity to finally take down a man who's been poisoning my city for too long. But make no mistake, Isabella, the moment you got in that car, your survival became my responsibility. I failed Michael. I won't fail you. There was something in the way he said it, in the intensity of his gaze, that made Isabella's pulse jump. This close, she could see the faint scar along his jawline, could see the flecks of gold in his green eyes, could smell that cologne that had to be custom-made because nothing that smelled that good came off a department store shelf. This close, he wasn't a terrifying mafia boss. He was just a man, complicated and dangerous, and maybe, possibly, telling her the truth. What do you need me to do? The question surprised her even as she asked it, but once it was out, she didn't take it back. Michael deserved justice, deserved someone to stand up and say his death mattered. If Adrian could give her that, maybe the risk was worth it. Adrian smiled, slow and sharp. I need you to trust me, and I need you to make Kozlov believe you're exactly what you appear to be. Michael's grieving sister, desperate enough to work with the police, scared enough to be useful. You want me to go to the police? I want you to go to Detective Sarah Morrison, specifically. She's been investigating Kozlov for years, and she's one of the few cops in this city who can't be bought. Adrian pulled out his phone, showed her a photo of a serious-looking woman in her 40s, dark hair pulled back, sharp eyes. You tell her everything that happened this morning. You tell her you think Kozlov tried to kill you because you've been asking questions about your brother's death. And what do I tell her about you? The truth. That I pulled you out of the line of fire. That I'm offering you protection. That you're terrified and don't know who to trust. Adrian's smile turned wolfish. Morrison already suspects I'm not as bad as Kozlov. This will confirm it. She'll offer you witness protection, probably try to convince you to testify against him. And when she does, you agree. You let her set you up in a safe house. You cooperate fully. Adrian tucked his phone away. And you make sure Kozlov's people know exactly where you are. The plan clicked into place in Isabella's mind, audacious and terrifying. You want to set a trap. I want to allow Kozlov to incriminate himself. Adrian moved away, giving her space to breathe, to think. He's already tried to harm you once. When he finds out you recovered and went to the police, he'll panic. He'll send people after you, and this time, Morrison will have the evidence she needs to move against him officially. And what happens to me when Kozlov's people show up? You won't be alone. The promise in Adrian's voice was absolute. My people will be watching every moment. The second there's a threat, we move. You'll never be in real danger. You can't guarantee that. No, Adrian admitted, but I can promise that anyone who tries to hurt you will regret it. Briefly. Isabella turned to the windows, looking out at the city that had taken her brother, trying to decide if she was brave enough or crazy enough to do this. Behind her reflection, she could see Adrian watching her, patient and predatory, waiting for her decision. If I do this, she said slowly, if I help you take down Kozlov, what happens after? Do I just go back to my normal life? Pretend none of this happened? Is that what you want? The question made her turn around. Adrian was closer than she'd expected, just a few feet away, and the way he was looking at her made something low in her belly tighten. I don't know what I want anymore. The honesty surprised her. 3 days ago, I wanted my brother back. I wanted someone to blame. I wanted everything to make sense. Now I don't know anything except that you're a criminal, and I should be running as far from you as possible, and instead, I'm standing in your penthouse seriously considering becoming bait in a mafia war. You could run. Adrian's voice was quiet. I'd let you. Set you up somewhere far from Chicago, new identity, enough money to start over. You could walk away from all of this. Could I? Isabella met his eyes. Or would Kozlov find me eventually? You said it yourself. I'm a loose end. I'm evidence. People like him don't just let loose ends walk away. No, Adrian agreed. They don't. Which means your safest option is to see this through. help me take him down, and you're no longer a threat. You're just a civilian who got caught up in something bigger than herself. A civilian you'll have no more use for." Something flickered in Adrian's expression, there and gone too fast to read. "Is that what you think? That I'm using you?" "Aren't you?" "Yes." The blunt admission should have hurt more than it did. "But that doesn't mean I don't care about keeping you alive. And it doesn't mean—" He stopped, jaw tightening, and Isabella realized with a jolt that he was struggling for words. "Your brother trusted me. He believed I was different from animals like Kozlov, that I had some kind of honor left. I owe him the debt of proving he was right. And what do you owe me?" Adrian stepped closer and Isabella's breath caught. She could feel the heat of him now, could see the way his eyes had darkened, storm clouds before lightning. "Everything," he said quietly. "I owe you everything, Isabella. Your protection, your safety, the truth, no matter how ugly. And if you let me, if you trust me enough to see this through, I'll owe you Kozlov's head on a silver platter." "I don't want his head." The words came out rougher than she intended. "I want my brother back. I want the last week to have been a nightmare I can wake up from. I want my life to go back to boring and predictable and safe. I can't give you any of that. I know." They stood there close enough that Isabella could count his heartbeats and the pulse at his throat, and she thought about all the terrible decisions that had led her to this moment. Trusting Sergei, believing Adrian had killed Michael, throwing hot coffee at a man who could snap her neck without breaking a sweat, stepping into his car, coming to his home, listening to his plan, wanting, God help her, to say yes. "Okay," she heard herself say. "I'll do it. I'll help you trap Kozlov." Adrian's smile was fierce. "You won't regret this." "I already regret this." But she was smiling too, a small, fragile thing that felt like defiance against the fear. "When do we start?" "Now." Adrian pulled out his phone, started typing. "I'll have my driver take you to the police station. Morrison should be there. I'll make sure she knows you're coming. You tell her everything, exactly as it happened. Don't lie, don't exaggerate. Morrison's smart. She'll read between the lines. And then? Then you let her do her job. She'll set you up in a safe house, probably start building a case. Meanwhile, I'll make sure Kozlov knows you're cooperating with the police." Adrian's expression was cold now, calculating. "He'll move against you within 48 hours. Maybe less if he's as rattled as I think he is. And when he does, you'll be waiting." "I'll be waiting," Adrian confirmed. "Along with Morrison's people, along with enough evidence to bury him." It sounded simple when he said it like that. Neat. Clean. Isabella knew better than to believe it would be anything but messy and dangerous and possibly fatal. But she'd already made her choice. She'd made it the moment she got in Adrian's car, or maybe even before that, when she'd decided to throw the coffee, when some instinct she didn't understand had screamed at her to move. "I need to call my parents," she said. "They'll be worried if they can't reach me." "No calls, not until this is over." Adrian's tone left no room for argument. "Kozlov might be monitoring your family's phones. I've already got people watching them, making sure they're safe, but any contact from you could put them in danger." The thought of her parents, grieving and scared, not knowing if they were about to lose another child, made Isabella's chest ache, but she nodded, accepting the necessity. This was what protection looked like in Adrian's world. Isolation and surveillance and trust that strangers with guns would keep the people you loved alive. "One more thing." Adrian caught her hand before she could turn away, and the contact sent electricity up her arm. "When this is over, when Kozlov's in the ground and you're safe, I want you to consider something." "What?" His thumb brushed over her knuckles, a gentle gesture at odds with everything else about him. "I want you to consider that maybe the life you had before, quiet and boring and safe, isn't the life you actually want. Maybe you threw that coffee because some part of you was tired of being invisible, tired of playing it safe." Isabella pulled her hand away, but the warmth of his touch lingered. "You don't know anything about me. I know you walked into my cafe planning to bug a mafia boss, which takes either courage or stupidity, and I don't think you're stupid. Adrian's smile was knowing. I know you didn't panic when bullets started flying. I know you're standing here right now, agreeing to be bait in a trap that could get you killed, because you want justice more than you want safety. That tells me plenty. It tells you I'm grieving and probably making terrible decisions. Maybe. He moved past her toward the elevator. Or maybe you're finally making the decision that matters. Come on, Morrison's waiting. The ride to the police station was silent. Isabella sat in the back of a different sedan, this one with bulletproof glass, Adrian had mentioned casually, like it was a normal feature, and watched the city pass by outside, pedestrians who had no idea how close they'd come to witnessing a murder this morning. Couples walking hand in hand, arguing about where to get lunch. A man selling flowers on the corner, bright colors against gray concrete. Normal life, continuing on, indifferent to the violence lurking beneath its surface. The driver, a different man this time, younger, with a scar bisecting his left eyebrow, met her eyes in the rearview mirror. You're doing a brave thing, miss. Or a stupid thing. Sometimes they're the same. His smile was surprisingly kind. Adrian's good people. He'll keep you safe. Isabella wanted to ask how good people ended up working for the Russian mafia, but the car was already pulling up to the station. The driver got out, opened her door, and she stepped onto the sidewalk, feeling like she was stepping off a cliff. Detective Morrison's on the 3rd floor. Just tell the desk sergeant you need to report an attempted murder. The driver handed her a card, blank except for a phone number. If anything goes wrong, you call that number. Someone will come for you. Always. Then he was back in the car, pulling away, and Isabella was alone on the steps of the police station, with a story that sounded like fiction, and evidence that consisted of coffee stains and bullet holes, and the word of a criminal who'd somehow convinced her to trust him. She climbed the steps, pushed through the doors, approached the desk sergeant, a tired-looking woman with gray hair and the eyes of someone who'd seen everything twice. I need to report an attempted murder, Isabella said, and her voice only shook a little. Mine. Detective Sarah Morrison was everything Adrian had promised, sharp, skeptical, and utterly focused. She listened to Isabella's story without interrupting, occasionally making notes, her expression giving nothing away. When Isabella finished, Morrison sat back in her chair, studying her. That's quite a tale, she said finally. It's the truth. The truth according to Adrian Volkov. Morrison's tone was dry. Who, coincidentally, comes out looking like your savior, while Dmitry Kozlov comes out looking like a psychotic killer. Kozlov is a psychotic killer. He murdered my brother. So you believe. Morrison pulled out a file, spread crime scene photos across the desk. Isabella's stomach turned, but she forced herself to look. Michael's death was ruled gang-related. We had witnesses placing him with known Kozlov associates hours before he died. We had forensics confirming the murder weapon belonged to Kozlov's organization. But no arrest. But no arrest, Morrison agreed, frustration bleeding into her voice. Kozlov has alibis made of steel and lawyers who cost more than I make in a year. We know he ordered the hit. We just can't prove it. What if I could help you prove it? Morrison's eyes sharpened. How? Adrian thinks Kozlov will try to kill me again. He thinks if you put me somewhere Kozlov's people can find me, they'll make a move, and you'll have evidence. Adrian thinks? Or you think? Does it matter? Isabella met the detective's gaze. My brother's dead. Someone shot at me this morning, and the man responsible is walking around free. If there's a chance to change that, I have to take it. Morrison was quiet for a long moment, and Isabella could see the calculations happening behind her eyes. Risk versus reward, duty versus danger, the weight of using a civilian as bait balanced against the opportunity to finally bring down a man who'd evaded justice for years. If we do this, Morrison said finally, we do it my way. Not Adrian's way, not the mob's way. You follow my instructions exactly. You report anything suspicious immediately, and if I say the operation's compromised, you get out. No arguments, no heroics. Understood? Understood. And you need to understand something else. Morrison leaned forward, intensity radiating from her. I've been after Kozlov for 6 years. I've watched him destroy lives, kill witnesses, corrupt good cops. If he even suspects you're working with us, he won't hesitate to make an example of you, just like he did with your brother. This isn't a game, Ms. Reed. This is war. Then let's make sure we win, Isabella said, and meant it. They spent the next 3 hours going over every detail. The cafe, the coffee, the shooting, Adrian's explanation, his plan. Morrison recorded it all, made Isabella repeat certain parts, checked facts against department records. By the time they were done, Isabella's throat was raw, and her head was pounding. I'm going to set you up in a safe house on the south side, Morrison said, pulling out a new burner phone, programming numbers into it. Plain apartment, nothing fancy. You'll have 2 officers with you at all times, rotating shifts. You don't go anywhere without clearance from me personally. When? Tonight. I'll have someone pick you up from your apartment, help you pack a bag, make it look normal. We don't want to tip off anyone who might be watching that you're under protection. Isabella took the phone, felt its weight in her palm. How long will this take? Hard to say. Could be a day, could be a week. Depends on when Kozlov makes his move. Morrison's expression softened slightly. I know this is scary, but you're doing the right thing. Your brother would be proud. Would he? Isabella wasn't sure. Michael had always been the careful one, the one who thought things through, who made spreadsheets for major decisions. Getting involved with the mob had been so unlike him, and it had cost him everything. Now Isabella was following in his footsteps, making the same dangerous choices, trusting the same dangerous people. Maybe it ran in the family. Maybe they were both just stupid enough to think they could make a difference. She left the police station as the sun was setting, painting the Chicago skyline in shades of orange and red that looked like fire. The burner phone was heavy in her pocket. Morrison's warnings echoed in her head, and somewhere in the city, Dmitry Kozlov was learning that she'd survived, that she'd gone to the police, that she was a problem that needed to be eliminated. Isabella's apartment felt wrong when she walked in. Too quiet, too ordinary, like it belonged to someone else's life. She moved through the rooms mechanically, packing clothes and toiletries, the mundane actions surreal against the backdrop of everything that had happened. Her phone, her real phone, buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Pack warm. Safe house has bad heating. Hey! Despite everything, Isabella smiled. Adrian Volkov, ruthless mafia boss, worried about her being cold. The contradictions of the man were going to give her whiplash. She added a sweater to her bag. The knock on her door came exactly when Morrison had said it would. 8 p.m., 2 officers in plain clothes, professional and polite. They swept her apartment first, checking for bugs or threats, then helped her carry her single duffel bag to an unmarked car. The safe house was everything Morrison had promised. Plain, forgettable, the kind of apartment that existed in every city, housing temporary people living temporary lives. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a kitchen with appliances from the 90s. The officers who'd driven her introduced themselves as Martinez and Chen, assured her they'd be outside if she needed anything, then left her alone. Isabella set her bag on the bed, looked around at the beige walls and generic furniture, and felt the weight of the day finally crash down on her. She sat, then lay back, staring at the water-stained ceiling. 24 hours ago, she'd been planning how to get evidence against her brother's killer. Now she was that evidence. Bait. The lure to draw out a monster. Her burner phone buzzed. Another text from Adrian's number. You did well today, Morrison called. She thinks you're brave. Isabella typed back. Morrison thinks I'm crazy. Same thing in our world. Is this your world now? Am I part of it? The response took longer this time. That's up to you. But for what it's worth, I hope so. Isabella stared at the words, trying to decipher their meaning. Was it just part of the game? Keep the bait compliant. Keep her invested. Make her feel special so she'd continue taking risks? Or was there something real beneath the manipulation? Some genuine connection forged in violence and shared purpose? She didn't know. Wasn't sure she could trust her own judgment anymore. Get some sleep, Adrian texted. Tomorrow might be complicated. She wanted to ask what that meant, but exhaustion was pulling her under like a riptide. She managed to change into sleep clothes, brush her teeth, crawl under the thin blankets. Outside, she could hear Martinez and Chen talking quietly, the occasional crackle of a police radio. Protection. Safety. The illusion of both, at least. Isabella closed her eyes and dreamed of coffee spilling in slow motion, of bullets that never stopped flying, of green eyes watching her from across a chasm she couldn't cross. She woke to shouting. The room was dark, disorienting, and for a moment Isabella didn't remember where she was. Then training she didn't know she had kicked in, Morrison's instructions, Adrian's warnings, and she was rolling out of bed, grabbing the burner phone, moving toward the bathroom where there was a lock and a window. Gunfire. Close. Too close. More shouting, Martinez yelling something about shots fired, Chen returning fire, and then a sound that made Isabella's blood freeze. Silence. She locked the bathroom door, shaking so badly she almost dropped the phone. Called the number Adrian had programmed first. Not Morrison, not 911, but the one marked only with an A. Isabella? His voice was sharp, alert. In the background, she could hear an engine, tires squealing. He was already moving. They're here, she whispered. Someone's attacking the safe house. I heard gunshots, and now it's quiet, and I don't know if Martinez and Chen are. Bathroom? Yes. Window? Small, 3rd floor. Don't try to leave. Bar the door, stay low, stay quiet. I'm 8 minutes out. Adrian. 8 minutes, Isabella. Can you stay alive for 8 minutes? I don't know. You can. His voice was hard as steel, absolute in its certainty. You're stronger than you think. Just breathe and stay quiet. I'm coming for you. The line went dead. Isabella wedged the bathroom door shut with the towel rack, a pathetic barrier that wouldn't stop anyone determined. She called Morrison next. Safe house is compromised, she said when the detective answered. Officers down, maybe. Shooters in the building. Get out of there. Go to the window. It's 3 floors up. Cursing, creative and vicious. Stay where you are. SWAT's rolling now. 5 minutes. I don't have 5 minutes. Then make them. Isabella hung up, looked around the tiny bathroom for anything that could be a weapon. Hairspray and a lighter, makeshift flamethrower if she got desperate. The towel rack she'd used to bar the door. Her keys clutched between her fingers like claws. Footsteps in the apartment. Heavy. Multiple people. Check the rooms. Male voice, accent thick enough to swim through. Russian. Kozlov's people, just like Adrian had predicted. The bedroom door slammed open. Sounds of searching, furniture being overturned. Getting closer. Bathroom's locked. Kick it in. Isabella backed against the far wall, next to the window. 3 floors up. If she jumped, she'd break both legs at minimum, probably her spine. If she stayed, she died. Not really a choice. The door shuddered under a kick. The towel rack held barely. Another kick. Wood splintered. Isabella opened the window, looked down at concrete that seemed very far away. She could hear sirens now, getting closer. SWAT coming. Adrian coming. Help was coming, but it wasn't coming fast enough. The door burst open. 2 men filled the doorway, guns out, and Isabella recognized the look in their eyes. This wasn't business. This was personal. Kozlov had told them to make her suffer. Hello, Michael's sister, the first one said, smiling. Boss wants to talk to you. The boss can go to hell. His smile widened. You first. Isabella did the only thing she could think of. She grabbed the hairspray and lighter, flicked the flame, pressed the spray, and sent a jet of fire directly at his face. He screamed, stumbling backward, and his partner fired, bullet going wide, punching through the shower curtain. Isabella dove, scrambled past them while they were disorganized, made it 3 steps into the bedroom before hands caught her, dragged her down. She fought, kicked and clawed and bit, everything she had, every dirty trick from self-defense classes she'd taken after Michael died. It wasn't enough. There were too many of them, and they were too strong, and gunfire. Different this time, from outside. The man holding her jerked, went limp, blood spraying across Isabella's face, hot and wet and horrifying. She screamed, couldn't help it, and then there were more shots, more bodies falling, and a voice cutting through the chaos. "Get away from her!" Adrian, not shouting, not panicked, calm and cold and absolutely deadly. Isabella looked up through the tangle of limbs and saw him in the doorway, gun in each hand, eyes like winter storms. He fired twice more, clinical and precise, and the last of Kozlov's men dropped. Then Adrian was across the room, pulling her up, checking her for injuries with quick, efficient hands. "Are you hurt? I'm okay." Her voice sounded far away. "I think I'm okay. You're covered in blood." "Not mine." Isabella looked down at herself, at the red staining her clothes, and felt hysteria bubbling up in her throat. "He was holding me, and then you shot him, and... breathe." Adrian's hands cupped her face, forcing her to focus on him instead of the bodies cooling on the floor. "Breathe, Isabella. In and out. You're in shock, but you're safe now." Safe. The word was absurd. She was standing in a room full of corpses, wearing a dead man's blood, and Adrian Volkov was telling her she was safe. The terrible thing was, she believed him. Sirens were screaming now, close enough to hurt. Adrian cursed under his breath, looking between Isabella and the window. "SWAT's here. Morrison's going to have questions I can't answer while I'm holding illegal firearms over a pile of bodies. I need to leave." "Don't!" The word surprised her, desperate and raw. "Don't leave me here. I have to. If they find me here, it complicates everything. Morrison won't be able to protect you if..." "I don't care about complicated." Isabella grabbed his jacket, held on. "You said 8 minutes. You said you'd come for me. You're here. Don't leave." Something in Adrian's expression cracked, just for a moment showing something underneath that might have been real emotion. Then he was kissing her, hard and desperate and tasting like violence and promise. His hands in her hair, her blood-soaked body pressed against his. It lasted seconds. Felt like forever. When he pulled back, his eyes were fierce. "I need to go. But I swear on everything I have, Isabella, this isn't over. Kozlov just declared war, and I'm going to end him for this. Adrian, trust me. One more time. Trust me." Then he was gone, disappearing through the window via a fire escape she hadn't known was there, and Isabella was alone with the dead when Morrison and her SWAT team burst through the door. The aftermath was chaos. Paramedics checking her for injuries. Crime scene techs photographing everything. Morrison taking her statement, eyes sharp with suspicion when Isabella explained about the phone call. The 8 minutes. The man who'd appeared just in time. "Adrian Volkov was here," Morrison said. "It wasn't a question. He saved my life. He also killed 4 people. 4 people who were trying to kill me." Isabella met the detective's gaze, refusing to back down. "You put me here. You said I'd be safe. I would have died if he hadn't come. Officers Martinez and Chen are in the hospital. Martinez took 2 bullets, Chen took 3. They're both critical because Kozlov's people got past them somehow, and I need to know how that happened." "How should I know? I was locked in a bathroom trying not to die." Morrison's jaw tightened, but she nodded. "You're right. I'm sorry. This is my fault. I should have had better security. Should have anticipated Kozlov would move this fast. It's not your fault. It's his." Isabella's voice hardened. "Kozlov did this. He sent those men. He's the one who should be in cuffs right now, not me. You're not in cuffs. But I'm not free to leave either, am I? You're a witness to multiple homicides. I'm bait that almost got eaten." Isabella stood, surprising herself with how steady she felt. "And I'm done playing your game by your rules. Adrian was right. The system can't touch Kozlov. He's too rich, too connected, too careful. But he just made a mistake. He came after me personally, left witnesses, left evidence. Use it. Build your case. But I'm not sitting in another safe house, waiting to die. What are you going to do? Isabella thought about Adrian's kiss, about the promise in his eyes, about the way he'd looked at her across a room full of bodies and seen someone worth saving. I'm going to finish this, she said, one way or another. Morrison stared at her for a long moment, and Isabella could see the conflict playing out. Cop versus pragmatist, law versus justice. Finally, Morrison pulled out a card, wrote something on the back. That's my personal number. You call me any time, any reason. And you tell Adrian Volkov that if he gets you killed, I'll arrest him for murder myself. Isabella took the card. I'll tell him. They let her leave an hour later, after more questions and photos and paperwork that would probably haunt her for years. A squad car dropped her at her apartment. Her real apartment. No longer safe, but at least familiar. She showered for 20 minutes, watching pink-tinged water circle the drain, trying to scrub away the memory of blood and gunfire and fear. When she got out, her burner phone was buzzing. Pack a bag. Real one this time. My driver will pick you up in 20 minutes. A. Isabella stared at the message, at the presumption, at the way Adrian just assumed she'd do what he said. She should be angry. Should tell him to go to hell. Should take Morrison's card and disappear into witness protection and never look back. Instead, she started packing. The driver was the same man from before. Scar and kind eyes. He didn't comment on her damp hair or her shaking hands, just opened the door and drove in silence. But this time, they didn't go to Adrian's penthouse. They drove out of the city, into suburbs that gradually became estates, gated communities with security that made the police station look casual. They stopped at a house, mansion really, set back from the road, surrounded by high walls and cameras. The driver walked her to the door, which opened before they reached it. Adrian stood in the doorway, and the relief on his face when he saw her was so naked, so real that Isabella's breath caught. You came, he said, like he'd expected her not to, like he'd been prepared for her to make the smart choice and run. You asked me to trust you. Isabella moved past him into the house, needing the distraction of space and new surroundings. Was that a mistake? Probably. Adrian closed the door, locked it. But I'm glad you're here anyway. The house was beautiful in an understated way. Wood floors and high ceilings. Art that was probably priceless. Furniture that looked comfortable instead of impressive. Through the windows, Isabella could see gardens, a pool, trees that created a natural barrier between this place and the rest of the world. Where are we? 40 minutes outside Chicago. It's been in my family for 3 generations. Adrian moved to a sideboard, poured 2 drinks without asking. Kozlov doesn't know about it, neither do the police. Right now, it's the safest place I can offer you. And after tonight? After I'm not useful anymore? Isabella. Adrian crossed to her, handed her the glass. You need to understand something. What happened at that safe house changed things. Kozlov sent 6 men after you, killed 2 cops, nearly killed you, did it all in the middle of a police operation. He's desperate and sloppy, which makes him dangerous. I know he's dangerous. I was there when his people tried to kill me. What you don't know is that going after you the way he did broke about 15 unwritten rules in our world. Adrian's expression was grim. Attacking cops directly, targeting civilians under police protection, doing it all so publicly. The other families are furious. Kozlov just made it acceptable for me to move against him openly. Meaning what? Meaning this stops being about evidence and police and legal games. This becomes about justice. Our justice. Adrian moved to the window, looking out at the darkened gardens. I've spent the last 4 hours on calls with the heads of every major organization in the city. They've all agreed. Kozlov's gone too far. He's become a liability we can't afford. The weight of what he was saying settled over Isabella like snow. You're going to kill him. I'm going to remove him from power. What happens after that depends on whether he's smart enough to accept exile or stupid enough to fight. Adrian turned back to her, and his eyes were hard. I wanted you here because I owe you the truth. Everything that happens from here, the violence and the consequences, it's happening because of you. Because you wouldn't stay quiet, wouldn't disappear, wouldn't play the victim Kozlov expected. You changed the game. I didn't ask for any of this. No, you asked for justice for your brother. Same thing in the end. Isabella drank, felt the burn of expensive vodka, and tried to process the maze of her emotions. Fear, definitely. Anger at being used, at being dragged into this world. But also something else, something fierce and sharp that might have been satisfaction. Kozlov had killed Michael, had tried to kill her, had gotten away with murder for years. If Adrian could stop him, wasn't that worth any price? Why did you kiss me? The question surprised her as much as it seemed to surprise him. At the safe house, before you left. Why? Adrian was quiet for a long moment. Because I thought I might not see you again. Because you were covered in blood and terrified, and still standing. Because you looked at me like I was something other than a monster. He set down his glass with careful control. Because I wanted to. That's not a good reason. No, Adrian agreed, but it's an honest one. Isabella moved to him, drawn by something she didn't want to examine too closely. This close, she could see the tension in his shoulders, could see that he was as affected by the night's events as she was, just better at hiding it. Morrison said to tell you that if you get me killed, she'll arrest you for murder. Adrian's smile was sharp. I like her. Adrian. Isabella put her hand on his chest, felt his heart beating fast beneath her palm. I need to know something, and I need you to be honest. Are you doing this for Michael? For me? Or is this about power and territory, and all the things you won't admit to? All of it. He covered her hand with his, held it there. I'm doing this because your brother was a good man who deserved better. Because you've been hurt by my world, and I can't undo that, but I can try to make it right. And yes, because taking down Kozlov benefits me and my family, and the entire city. It's not one reason, Isabella. It's all of them at once. And after? When this is done and Kozlov's gone, and I'm not useful anymore, then I'm going to ask you to stay anyway. Adrian's voice was quiet, intense. I'm going to ask you to choose this life, this world, knowing exactly what it means. I'm going to ask you to let me keep you safe and drive you crazy, and probably make you regret every decision that led you here. His hand tightened on hers, and I'm going to hope that you're reckless enough to say yes. Isabella's breath caught. She should say no, should walk away from this beautiful, dangerous man and his beautiful, dangerous world. Should take Morrison's card and disappear into witness protection and spend the rest of her life being boring and safe and alone. Instead, she kissed him. This kiss was different from the first, slower, deeper, tasting like choice instead of desperation. Adrian's hands came up to frame her face, gentle despite the violence those hands were capable of, and Isabella felt something in her chest crack open, letting in light and fear and possibility. When they broke apart, Adrian's eyes were storm-dark, searching her face. Is that a yes? It's a maybe. Isabella stepped back, needing space to think. Ask me again when this is over. When Kozlov's gone and Michael has justice, and I'm not making decisions based on trauma and fear. Ask me then, and I'll give you a real answer. Fair enough. Adrian moved to the sideboard, pulled out his phone. In the meantime, you should eat something. You haven't eaten since this morning, and you've had about 3 lifetimes worth of stress. As if summoned by his words, a woman appeared in the doorway. Older, motherly, with sharp eyes that took in Isabella's state in one glance. Kitchen's ready, Mr. Volkov. I made borscht and bread, and there's tea. Thank you, Vera. Adrian turned to Isabella. Vera's worked for my family since I was a child. She's aggressively protective and doesn't care that I'm theoretically her boss. You're safe with her. Vera snorted. Someone needs to keep you alive, boy, since you seem determined to get yourself killed. She gestured for Isabella to follow. "Come, you eat. You look like a strong wind could knock you over." Isabella found herself following, drawn by the promise of food and normalcy, and this fierce grandmother who treated a mafia boss like a wayward son. The kitchen was huge and warm, all copper pots and worn wood, and Vera sat her at a table that could seat 12, placed a bowl of rich red soup in front of her, and stood there with crossed arms until Isabella took a bite. "Good?" Vera demanded. "Amazing," Isabella admitted, and it was. The flavors exploded on her tongue, hearty and complex, and she realized she was starving. Vera nodded, satisfied, and turned to Adrian. "You. Sit. Eat. You're no good to anyone if you collapse." Adrian sat, obedient in a way that would have been funny if Isabella weren't still processing everything. They ate in silence, the soup and bread and strong tea slowly bringing feeling back to Isabella's numb extremities. "How long have you worked for Adrian?" Isabella asked Vera, needing conversation, needing to think about something other than blood and bullets. 32 years. Started with his father, then Adrian when he took over. Vera refilled Isabella's tea. Seen him grow from angry boy to angrier man, but good man, underneath. "Vera," Adrian's warning was half-hearted. "She should know." Vera turned back to Isabella. "This life, his life, it's not easy. Dangerous, yes. Violent, yes. But Adrian, he has rules. Has honor. Not like some. Not like Kozlov's scum who kills children and sells women." Isabella's throat tightened. "He told you about my brother. He tells me everything." Vera's expression softened. "He was very angry when Michael died. Blamed himself. Couldn't save the boy, so now he saves you. Is how he works. I'm not something to be saved. No, you're something worth saving." "Different thing." Vera collected the empty bowls. "Now, you sleep. Guest room is ready, 2nd floor, 3rd door. Tomorrow, everything is complicated. Tonight, you rest." It wasn't a suggestion. Isabella found herself standing, exhaustion hitting her like a physical wave. Adrian stood too, walked her to the stairs. "She's right," he said. "Sleep. I have calls to make, plans to finalize. You'll be safe here." "Will I see you tomorrow?" "Probably not. I'll be coordinating with the other families, making arrangements. But the day after," his expression hardened. "The day after, it ends. One way or another." Isabella wanted to ask more, wanted to make him promise he'd be careful, wanted things she had no right to want from a man she barely knew. Instead, she nodded and climbed the stairs. The guest room was beautiful. 4-poster bed, windows overlooking the gardens, furniture that matched the house's understated elegance. Isabella changed into sleep clothes from her hastily packed bag and lay down on sheets that smelled like lavender. She expected nightmares. Expected to see bodies falling, blood spraying, guns firing in endless loops. Instead, she dreamed of green eyes and promises that tasted like vodka and danger. She woke to sunlight and birdsong, and the smell of coffee. For a moment, Isabella let herself pretend this was normal. Just a morning in a beautiful house. No blood or violence or men who killed without hesitation. Then reality crashed back in, and she remembered. Michael was dead. Kozlov had tried to kill her twice. And somewhere in the city, Adrian was planning the kind of justice that didn't happen in courtrooms. Isabella showered, dressed in jeans and a soft sweater, and followed the coffee smell to the kitchen. Vera was there, cooking something that smelled like heaven, and she nodded approval at Isabella's appearance. Better. Less like ghost, more like fighter. She poured coffee, added cream without asking. "Adrian left early. Said to tell you he'll call tonight." "Did he say anything else?" "Said to tell you that Martinez and Chen will be okay. Both out of surgery, both stable." Vera set a plate of blini in front of Isabella, thin pancakes with jam and sour cream. "Also said to give you this." She handed over an envelope. Inside, Isabella found a phone, not a burner this time, but a real smartphone, and a note in angular handwriting. "This phone is secure. Morrison's number is programmed in, along with mine. There are guards on the property, but you're not a prisoner. If you need anything, ask Vera. If you need to leave, the driver will take you anywhere you want to go, including away from here, if that's your choice. I meant what I said last night. When this is over, I'm going to ask you to stay. But the decision is yours, always. A. Isabella read it twice, trying to decipher everything between the lines. Adrian was giving her an out, making sure she knew she could leave, that she wasn't trapped. It was manipulative and thoughtful in equal measure, and she hated how much that combination affected her. He's a good man, Vera said, watching her. Complicated, yes. Dangerous, yes. But good, where it matters. How can you work for him? The question came out before Isabella could stop it. How can you watch him do the things he does and still love him? Vera's smile was sad. Because I knew his father. Knew what he would have become if he'd followed that path. Adrian chose different. Chose to have rules, have honor. In this world, that is miracle. It's still criminal. Yes. Vera didn't flinch from the truth. But world is not simple place. Sometimes criminal with honor is better than lawman with none. Sometimes choosing lesser evil is only choice you have. Isabella thought about Morrison, about how the detective had admitted Kozlov had evaded justice for years. Thought about her brother, trying to do the right thing and dying for it. Thought about the system that had failed Michael, and would probably fail her too if she relied on it. I don't know if I can do this, she admitted quietly. I don't know if I can be the kind of person who accepts this world. Then don't accept it. Change it. Vera turned back to her cooking. Adrian thinks you can. Thinks you're strong enough to stand in this life and not let it break you. Maybe he's right. Maybe you're what he needs. Someone who sees the monster and sees the man, and chooses to love both. I don't love him. I barely know him. Yet you're here. Vera's knowing look made Isabella's cheeks heat. You could have run. Could have taken police protection. Disappeared. Instead, you're in his house, eating his food, trusting him with your life. Maybe not love yet, but maybe getting close. Isabella couldn't argue with that, so she focused on the blini instead, on the sweet tart flavor of jam and the richness of sour cream. Outside the windows, she could see the gardens properly now. Roses and hedges and a fountain, beautiful and carefully maintained. A fortress disguised as paradise. She spent the day in strange limbo. Vera showed her around the house. Library full of first editions, gym that looked military grade, study with security monitors showing every angle of the property. Isabella read, worked out, tried not to think about what Adrian was doing in the city. The phone rang at 6 p.m. Adrian's number. Hi. Isabella's voice came out smaller than she intended. Hi. He sounded tired. How are you holding up? I'm fine. She's amazing, actually. Bossy and kind and slightly terrifying. Adrian's laugh was warm. That's Vera. She threatened to box my ears this morning when I tried to leave without breakfast. Did you eat? Eventually. She's very persistent. A pause. Isabella, I need to tell you something. Tomorrow night we're moving against Kozlov. It's happening at his nightclub downtown, neutral territory, lots of witnesses, public enough that he can't claim self-defense. Isabella's stomach clenched. What are you going to do? What needs to be done? The other families will be there, representatives from the old organizations. We're going to give Kozlov a choice, leave Chicago voluntarily, or be removed permanently. And if he chooses to fight, then it gets messy. Adrian's voice was grim, but it ends either way. Tomorrow night, Kozlov's reign is over. Your brother gets justice, and you get to decide if you can live with how that justice was delivered. Will you be safe? Safe enough. I've survived worse. He paused. I'm sending a car for you tomorrow night. 9 p.m. The meeting starts at 10, and I want you there. Why? Because this is your justice as much as mine. Because you deserve to see it through. And because... He stopped, and Isabella could hear the vulnerability he was trying to hide. Because I want you there. I want you to see exactly who I am and what I'm capable of. And then I want you to decide if you can stay." Isabella closed her eyes, feeling the weight of his request. "You're asking me to watch you potentially kill someone. I'm asking you to witness justice for your brother. The rest is just details." "Those are pretty significant details, Adrian." "I know, which is why I'm giving you the choice. Come tomorrow, or don't. Either way, Kozlov ends, but I'd rather you were there to see it." Isabella thought about Michael, about the closed casket and her parents' grief, and the 3 months she'd spent being angry at the world. She thought about the bullets at the cafe, the men at the safe house, all the violence that had been visited on her because she'd dared to ask questions. "What should I wear?" she asked, and heard Adrian's sharp intake of breath. "Something you don't mind getting blood on," he said, "just in case." The line went dead. Isabella sat there holding the phone, wondering if she'd just agreed to become an accomplice to murder or a witness to justice, wondering if there was even a difference anymore. Vera appeared in the doorway, as if summoned by Isabella's distress. "He told you about tomorrow?" "Yes." "And you're going?" "I think I have to." Isabella looked at the older woman. "Does that make me a terrible person?" "Makes you person who wants closure." Vera sat beside her, and her presence was surprisingly comforting. "Michael was your family. You want to see his killer face consequences. Nothing terrible about that." "Even if the consequences aren't legal? Legal and just are not always same thing?" Vera patted her hand. "You go tomorrow. You watch. You decide. And then you live with decision, whatever it is." That night, Isabella lay awake staring at the ceiling, trying to imagine what tomorrow would bring. She'd never been to a nightclub, had lived most of her life in libraries and quiet spaces, and now she was going to witness what might be an execution. The thought should have terrified her more than it did. The next day crawled past. Isabella tried to read, couldn't focus, tried to work out, gave up after 10 minutes. Finally, she went to find Vera in the kitchen. "Teach me something," she said. "Anything. I need to stop thinking." Vera studied her, then nodded. "Come, I show you how to make proper pelmeni." They spent the afternoon making dumplings, Vera's hands sure and quick, Isabella's clumsy but improving. It was meditative work, the repetitive motions calming, and Vera filled the silence with stories about Adrian as a child. Serious and intense even then, but with moments of surprising gentleness. "He brought home stray cat once," Vera said, laughing at the memory. "His father was furious, said Volkovs don't keep pets. But Adrian stood up to him, said if his father could keep organization full of strays, he could keep one cat. Father was so surprised he let him keep it." "What happened to the cat?" "Lived to be 19. Died in Adrian's arms 5 years ago. He cried." Vera's expression softened. "That's who he is, underneath all the hard. Someone who loves fiercely and protects what's his. I'm not his. No, but he wants you to be. And I think maybe you want it too, even if you won't admit it yet." At 8:30, Isabella went upstairs to change. Vera had laid out clothes on the bed, black pants that fit perfectly, a dark blue blouse, a leather jacket that was definitely not from Isabella's suitcase. Understated, practical, expensive. She dressed, studied herself in the mirror. She looked different, harder, somehow, like the past few days had carved away something soft and left angles behind. Her dark hair fell around her shoulders, and her eyes seemed larger, more intense. She looked like someone who could witness violence and not break. The car arrived exactly at 9. Different driver this time, older, with the kind of face that had seen everything twice. He opened the door without speaking, and Isabella got in. The drive into the city felt like descending into a different world. Suburbs gave way to downtown, bright lights and crowded streets, people everywhere who had no idea what was about to happen in the nightclub on 5th Avenue. They pulled up to a building with no sign, just a red door and a line of people waiting to get in. But the car bypassed all that, went around to a private entrance where security guards nodded and stepped aside. Isabella followed the driver through a maze of hallways, upstairs, into a private room that overlooked the club floor. Glass walls gave a perfect view of the crowd below, dancing, drinking, living their normal lives. Adrian was there, standing at the glass. He turned when she entered, and the way his eyes moved over her made her breath catch. "You came," he said, like he hadn't quite believed she would. "You asked me to." Isabella moved to stand beside him, looking down at the crowd. "When does it start?" "Soon. Kozlov's here, VIP section, northeast corner. The other families are in position." Adrian gestured to figures positioned throughout the club, men and women who looked like regular patrons, but held themselves with the awareness of predators. "When I give the signal, the doors lock. No one leaves until this is done." "What's the signal?" Adrian smiled, sharp and cold. "You'll know it when you see it." As if summoned by his words, the music changed. Something darker, more driving, and the crowd's energy shifted. Isabella saw a man stand in the VIP section, mid-40s, expensive suit, the kind of handsome that belonged in cologne ads. He was laughing, drink in hand, surrounded by people who clearly feared and admired him in equal measure. That's Kozlov? She'd expected someone more obviously monstrous. That's him. Charming, isn't he? Adrian's voice was acid. He could sell water to fish. It's how he's gotten away with everything for so long. No one wants to believe that smile hides what it does. Isabella studied Kozlov, trying to reconcile the laughing man below with the monster who'd killed her brother. It should have been harder to make the connection. Instead, she found herself thinking that evil rarely looked like evil. It looked like charm and charisma, and people who knew how to make you trust them. The families are ready. Adrian pulled out his phone, typed something. "Last chance, Isabella. You can leave. You don't have to see this." "Yes, I do." She turned to face him fully. Michael deserves a witness. Someone to say his death mattered, that consequences existed. Even if those consequences are, she gestured at the club below, at the trap about to spring. Adrian studied her for a long moment, something like respect and regret and hunger mixing in his expression. Then he nodded and turned to the glass. He raised his hand, dropped it. The lights went out. Emergency lighting kicked in immediately, dim and red, turning the club into something from a nightmare. The music cut off. For a moment there was silence, confused and expectant. Then the doors slammed shut. Isabella saw it happen in waves, the family's people moving in, surrounding Kozlov's table, cutting off escape routes. Kozlov stood, and even from here, she could see his expression change, see him realize the trap too late. A spotlight came on, pinning him in place. And then Adrian was speaking, his voice amplified through the club's sound system, cold and absolute. "Dmitry Kozlov, you've been called to account." Isabella watched Kozlov's face as he searched for the voice, finally spotting their window. Even from this distance, she could see his sneer. "Adrian Volkov, hiding behind glass like coward. How Russian of you." "Funny, coming from a man who sends others to kill for him?" Adrian's voice was conversational, almost friendly. "Tell me, Dmitri, do you remember Michael Reed?" Kozlov's expression flickered, there and gone. "Should I?" "Young man, 23, worked for you briefly before you slit his throat and threw him in the river. You killed him because you thought he was informing to the FBI. You were right, by the way. He was, but not for the reasons you thought." The club was completely silent now, everyone watching the spotlight, watching Kozlov. Isabella's hands were clenched so tight, her nails cut crescents in her palms. "I don't know what you're talking about." But Kozlov's voice had lost its confidence. "Michael Reed was trying to stop your trafficking operation. He'd seen what you do to those girls, the ones you promised jobs and futures and then force into prostitution. He was gathering evidence, and when you found out, you killed him. Brutally, publicly, as a message." "Prove it." Kozlov's smile was vicious. "You have no proof." I have testimony from 3 of your own people who've agreed to turn state's evidence. I have financial records showing payments to the men who killed Michael, and I have this." Adrian pulled out his phone, and suddenly the screens throughout the club came alive. Video footage, grainy but clear enough, of Kozlov meeting with Michael, of the confrontation, of Kozlov's order to take care of the problem. Isabella's breath stopped. Adrian had evidence. Real evidence. Evidence that could have gone to the police, could have led to a real arrest. "Why not take this to Morrison?" she asked, too quietly for anyone but Adrian to hear. "Because Morrison's case would take years, and Kozlov has lawyers who could get him off on technicalities. Because even if he went to prison, he'd run his empire from inside. Because legal justice isn't always real justice." Adrian looked at her, and his eyes were hard. "Because I promised you he'd pay. Not eventually. Not maybe. Now." On the floor below, Kozlov was looking around wildly, seeing the video, seeing his own people backing away, seeing the trap close. "This is illegal! You can't..." "Can't what? Hold you accountable for murder? For trafficking? For terrorizing this city?" Adrian's voice cut like a blade. "The families have voted, Dmitri. You're finished. The question is whether you leave Chicago alive." "You can't kill me." But Kozlov's bravado was cracking. "I have protection. I have people. Your people are here?" Adrian gestured, and from the shadows, men and women stepped forward, Kozlov's own security, his trusted lieutenants. One by one, they turned their backs on him. They've chosen survival over loyalty. Can't say I blame them. Isabella watched Kozlov's face as he realized he was alone, that no one was coming to save him. She should have felt satisfaction, should have felt justice being served. Instead, she felt hollow. "Adrian." She touched his arm, drawing his attention. "Don't kill him." Adrian's eyes snapped to her, surprised. "What?" "Don't kill him. Give him to Morrison. Let the law handle this." Isabella gestured at the screens, at the evidence. "You have everything she needs for a conviction. Let it be legal. Let Michael's death mean something more than just another body. Isabella, he'll fight it. He'll delay and appeal and he'll lose. You just showed his own people betraying him. You showed proof of his crimes. Morrison can build a case that sticks." She moved closer, urgent. "Adrian, please. If you kill him, you're no different than he is. You're just another criminal executing someone without trial. But if you turn him over, if you let the system work this once..." The system failed Michael. And killing Kozlov won't bring him back. Isabella's voice broke. But maybe letting him face actual justice, letting him rot in prison while everyone knows what he did, maybe that means something. Maybe that's the justice Michael would have wanted. Adrian stared at her, and she could see the war in his eyes. Vengeance versus mercy. The easy violence versus the harder choice. Around them, the club waited, silent and expectant. Finally, Adrian raised the phone back to his lips. "Detective Morrison, you're going to want to get down here. I have a gift for you." The relief that flooded Isabella was almost painful. She sagged against the glass, watching as uniformed police started pouring into the club, as Morrison herself appeared and took custody of Kozlov, as the video evidence was handed over and the witnesses were secured. Legal justice. Messy and imperfect, but real. "Why did I listen to you?" Adrian's voice was rough, and when Isabella turned, she saw something raw in his expression. "I had him. I could have ended this. Because I asked you to. Because somewhere underneath the mafia boss, there's a man who wants to be better than his father." Isabella touched his face, gentle. "Because you're not a monster, Adrian." "Not really. And I needed to see that before I could answer your question." "What question?" "Whether I could stay." Isabella took a breath, let it out slowly. "Whether I could choose this world, knowing what it costs." Adrian went very still. "And can you?" "I watched you nearly kill a man tonight. I watched you threaten and manipulate. and use the kind of power that should terrify me. And then I watched you stop. I watched you choose mercy because I asked, even though every instinct you have probably said to finish it. Isabella's smile was trembling, but real. So yes, I think I can stay. I think I can stand beside you and keep pushing you toward mercy. I think maybe that's what you need. Someone who sees the monster and the man, and loves them both enough to fight for the man. You love me? Adrian's voice was barely a whisper. I could. Eventually. If you let me. If you keep choosing mercy over violence, law over revenge, justice over vengeance. Isabella kissed him, soft and brief. If you keep being the kind of criminal who has honor. Adrian's laugh was shaky. That's a lot of conditions. You're a lot of man. You can handle it. Below them, Morrison was leading Kozlov away in handcuffs, and the club was slowly coming back to life, people confused but relieved. The family's representatives were dispersing, nodding to Adrian through the glass, approval and maybe respect. What happens now? Isabella asked. Now? Morrison builds her case. Kozlov goes to trial. The trafficking operation gets dismantled. The city gets a little bit safer. Adrian pulled her closer, and his arms around her felt like safety and danger and choice. And I apparently have a girlfriend who's going to make my life very complicated. Girlfriend is a little high school. How about partner? In crime? In conscience. Isabella leaned into him, let herself feel the relief and exhaustion and strange, fragile hope. Someone has to keep you honest. And you think you can? I think I have to try. For Michael. For all the other Michaels who might need someone to stand up when the law fails. She pulled back enough to meet his eyes. You can do good in this world, Adrian. Real good. You just need someone to remind you when you're forgetting. Adrian studied her face for a long moment, and Isabella saw the moment he accepted it. Accepted her conditions, her partnership, her audacious belief that a mafia boss could be something more than his legacy demanded. Partners, then, he said, and kissed her properly, deep and claiming and full of promise. When he pulled back, his eyes were lighter than she'd ever seen them, storm clouds breaking. God help us both. God help anyone who gets in our way. Isabella grinned. Now take me home. I want to tell Vera we're keeping you. Adrian laughed, genuine and surprised, and Isabella thought maybe this was what justice looked like in the real world. Messy and imperfect and requiring compromise. But real, solid. Something she and Michael had both fought for, each in their own way. 6 months later, Isabella stood in a courtroom watching Dmitry Kozlov be sentenced to 40 years in federal prison. Morrison was there, looking satisfied and exhausted. Adrian was there, sitting in the back, looking dangerous and proud. And Isabella was there, holding the knowledge that her brother's death had meant something, had led to real change. After, on the courthouse steps, reporters tried to corner her. Isabella ignored them, moving to where Adrian waited by the car. How does it feel? He asked. Like closure. Like the beginning of something new. Isabella took his hand, and the gold band on her ring finger caught the light. Like maybe we can build something good out of all this tragedy. Adrian's smile was soft, private, the expression he saved only for her. Partners in conscience. Partners in everything. Isabella kissed him, there on the courthouse steps with reporters watching and cameras flashing, claiming her choice publicly. Now, take me to the foundation office. We have work to do. The Michael Reed Foundation for Trafficking Victims had opened 3 months ago, funded by Adrian's money but run by Isabella. Real work, helping real people, the kind of legacy her brother would have been proud of. Yes, ma'am. Adrian opened the car door, and Isabella caught sight of the gun at his back, the reminder that he was still who he was. Still dangerous, still criminal, still capable of violence when needed, but also capable of mercy, of choice, of being something more than his father's legacy. Isabella got in the car, Adrian beside her, and they drove into their complicated, dangerous, fiercely protected future. Not perfect, not safe, but real and honest, and built on the kind of justice that didn't fit in courtrooms but mattered anyway. The kind of justice worth fighting for, worth staying for, worth building a life around. One careful, compromised, beautiful choice at a time. And in the end, that was enough.